permit for this?
I would, yes. Or you would just hugely oversize it.
And then the building inspector would say, okay, because it's giant.
I don't know. It's building inspectors or building inspectors. I mean,
Sure,
yours might say
I think
yes.
that's the only.
Yours might say yes. Yours might say no.
It's the most accurate thing we've said the last 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Fine Home Building Podcast, a weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. You're listening to Rob Yagid, Brian Pontolilo, and me, Justin Fink. Say hi, guys.
Hey.
Hey,
FHB Podcast at Taunton.com, finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Those are the two things you need to know to get in touch with us and check out everything related to this show and all the other shows. And we are on episode 127, Jeff? Is that what you said?
I believe so, yes.
Good Lord. Who knew we had this much to talk about?
It's a lot.
We haven't talked about air sealing in several episodes either.
I think we could wait a little while.
I was on the phone with a buddy of mine yesterday who likes to listen to the podcast, and he gave me a hard time about...
You want to give him a shout out?
He gave me a hard time about roof venting.
What do you mean?
He said, I love listening to the podcast. I forget what he said, how he said it exactly, but something like, I love listening to the podcast and listening to you guys talk about roof venting.
Dang, see?
Yeah.
Like that.
Yep.
Yeah. Some people call it the Fine Roof Venting Podcast.
That's right.
Well, listen, if people would just figure it out, we wouldn't have to talk about it every time.
I think they figured it out.
Rob's put the kibosh. We're not doing it anymore.
Listen to episodes 1 through 100.
Yes.
You'll figure it out.
So we're all kind of regrouping. Ryan and I were in San Francisco for a show. Rob was taking a little time off. So let's all catch up.
Yeah, how was the show?
It was good. It's a good show. Good turnout.
Yeah.
San Francisco is an interesting city. Very expensive. I don't know what they're going to do.
Very
Just period.
wild market for real estate, of course, but that in turn also for builders.
Yes.
You know?
And I got to tell you, this is one of the few places, I don't say this lightly, driving around there, I feel like as a builder, you really have to be an expert in building in San Francisco to be a builder there. Because some of those situations where houses are touching, I mean,
Like
and
row
the way that
houses
they're put together and the different, they're just different. I mean, just like if you were a contractor solely in the heart of New York City,
Yeah.
it doesn't translate.
It's a different kind of
It's
deal.
a different kind of thing. Yeah, and the architecture in San Francisco ranges so much from these really old row houses and those kinds of, almost like a mission style, creeping in there, some Victorian type stuff, and then like real modern, like just cubes, cubes of glass, and
Those are your favorite,
you
right?
know how I feel about those. We were driving through all sorts of neighborhoods after the show was over, doing a little sightseeing, and it's not for me. I liked the city. Don't want to live there.
No.
Don't like the architecture. Sorry. No, it's just not my thing. I got too much New England in me.
You do.
You know.
I tell you what, though, I love those sweet little Victorians.
They're
that
really
you just
nice.
find, like, I sent you guys a photo of that one. Like, you just find them. You're walking down to any street in San Francisco, and all of a sudden there's this, like, sweet little Victorian with all these great details.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
like,
the amount of details is like,
it's crazy.
astonishing.
it's astonishing, yeah.
So what is the deal with that? I mean, houses. Let's say, setting aside all cost of living increase or inflation, figuring out the difference between a house in 1920 versus one in 2020, and does the dollar go as far and blah blah blah. But how did they afford to put that much detail into something?
Justin and I have mentioned this before because there's a few great Victorians in the area where we live, and we'd mentioned the construction time has got to be tripled.
And I mean, maybe
when you're executing that level of detail.
Well, so I mean, like, who lived in those houses? Is it the person who now lives in a McMansion? Is it that kind of person? Because you could always say, like, well, it was somebody who had more money than the average worker, and fine, that's fine. But
Well,
why is it that money back then translated into we want more details on our house, whereas now it translates into we just want square footage, and we're never going to use any of it?
It's just,
I don't think it necessarily did. I think often in past times, the way buildings ended up the way they were, and yes, of course, money had a lot to do with it, but what had as much of an impact on it was what was available locally, because everything was localized in terms of skills,
Yes.
tradespeople with certain skills, and then materials. And what was like when you look at, so for example, when you look at Shaker, traditional Shaker homes in villages and buildings, we have an idea of what the Shaker aesthetic looks like. But if you actually look around at Shaker stuff through different locations and time periods, there's actually quite a variety in the Shaker style, and it was based on what was available in that area for knowledge, skill, and materials.
Yeah, I mean, the Shaker thing aside, because if you dig into that, there really is no Shaker style. People have completely picked and chosen.
We've decided what to call the Shaker style now.
We've curated it, and we've said this is the Shaker style. But in reality, it's just like it's as varied as anything else. You go, like you said, to all those Shaker villages, and the style is totally different from place to place and from maker to maker within that community.
I think that's true, but I think that's true of Victorian homes too. If you look at Victorians across the country and through the span of when Victorians were being built, you have everything from the super ornate Queen Anne Victorians to Victorians that hold the shape but essentially have the detailing of a farmhouse to the shingle style, which is a Victorian.
But that's not the question. Yeah. The question is the detail.
That was a question.
How were they going about putting that much detail in and kind of making it work financially? Like, because it's not like, we're not trying to say that all Victorians had that high level of detail. We're trying to say, how was it that people that were not Thomas Jefferson could afford to pay somebody to hand carve their front porch posts and, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get it for sure.
And is it just that it was so much cheaper? Everybody knew how to do it to such an extent that, you know,
and that's definitely, and that's what I was getting at. That's definitely part of it. If you have a city that is taking on that style, and you have the craftspeople to do it, and you have the materials to do it, then the costs come down. And there's a ton of those houses in San Francisco. But there's not three. If there were three, they would be super expensive houses.
But still, when you look at some of those projects and the level of detail, I mean, yes, they're probably expert craftsmen, but it's not like that they were motoring through those projects.
Right.
There's just no way.
And they were, and I'm not saying that they weren't for a wealthier homeowner. They probably were, but probably not the wealthiest of the time in that area.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
You know, that was the middle class equivalent of a good house.
Well, that's what I just said.
Family.
What are we talking about here? All right, we solved that. So let's move on.
We created and solved that.
Okay. So on the opposite end of the spectrum, these kind of classic old Victorians that fortunately lots of them are being restored. You had the opportunity, Brian, to go on a few tours.
Yes.
What was that like?
It was largely irrelevant in terms of what we in terms of what we do and talk about.
Moving on.
Talk about here at Fine Homebuilding, because we were mostly talking about custom single-family homes. And what I got to tour, I went on a tour that was called South Bay Cellars. South Bay is south of San Francisco, headed down into the Silicon Valley region. And so the idea of the tour was that they were going to take us around and they were going to show us how home builders were solving for affordable homes in the South Bay where prices are astronomical. And what I ended up seeing were what they call communities. The builders call communities. We would probably call them a development. They'll buy a piece of land. There's a lot of land around there. I don't know how much land is available, but there's a lot of land. And they'll buy a piece of land, and then they'll pack it with as many units. So, because there's going to be a variety of different home types in there, as many units as they possibly can. So we're talking about Toll Brothers and Pulte and True Homes, and these H.R. Norton. Is that the big home builder? These just massive nationwide home builders who are doing this. And so they're trying to solve for affordable homes, and affordable homes start at $1.2 million. That's what it seems like in this area. And so in these communities, and they call them a community basically because they put in sidewalks, they put in pools,
but
they
it's
put
not
in
like true
rec
mixed-use
areas.
development.
It's not true mixed use, and there's not sort of business areas around or anything around in terms of commerce. They're sort of out in the middle of nowhere, but there's a pool and there's a gym that everyone can share. And then they have everything from entry level to luxury homes in them. They start around $1 million, $1.2 million, and they go up to $2.8 million for the luxury versions.
And these are affordable homes in California?
These are affordable homes
in and around the Bay Area?
In this area.
Okay.
And they're fascinating. They're very tall because they want to put as much square footage, like you said, Justin, on this little piece of,
like 3 floors?
So 3 floor, 4 floors homes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Very commonly the living areas are up
Yeah, Brian and I were we've talked about this a little bit at the show, and it led us to this discussion of we need to be publishing some information for how to do a good 3-floor plan. I mean, we don't do it very much because we're so, so much of the country is detached single family homes that are usually 2 floors, or plus an attic / basement, whatever. But, when you go into these tighter areas, it's always 3 floors.
Interesting.
And we do some of it, but not.
Yeah.
Well, and because they all also have pretty tall ceilings, it's just like staircases. It's like Stairway to Heaven. Staircases for
keeps
days.
on going, right?
The houses, these places just seem to go up and up and up. But it's fascinating to see how these kind of builders work. And I mean, I just got to glimpse it through observation, But one of the most interesting places was the Toll Brothers community that we visited, where they're building 600 units, entry level to luxury. They have nothing. They have nothing to show yet. They don't even have a model home built yet. They have a virtual reality tour. They've already sold 250 units. They told us that the first weekend that they put homes on sale, they decided to raise the prices $350,000 across the board because they were selling too quick.
Didn't price it right.
Yeah. They didn't price it right.
Too cheap.
But what was fascinating to watch, you don't see for all of this construction, you don't see big crews. You see very specialized crews working around, around the thing. And then they have these on-site lumber yards, very well organized lumber yards where all the lumber is laid out neatly, and they can send a guy in with a lift. He can pick up the framing package for that day for this crew working in one place, drive it over to them, lift it up onto that deck. Jeez. It's right exactly what they need for a day's work is there for them. And so I think it probably has a lot of similarities to commercial construction. The really refined project management of commercial.
Are they all the same model, or is it like there's like 3 models to choose from in the community kind of thing?
There's often models to choose from, and levels of finishes, I think.
What do you think the lead time on that kind of a house is? When they're selling 65 in the first weekend, is it like, congratulations, but we're not going to have it done for you until 3 years from now?
I think people are waiting a while. Probably not 3 years, but a while.
I think so.
They can't start 65 houses at once.
They do move people in as soon as they have units open. They don't finish the whole community because we were in a couple communities that were moving people in, but they were still building.
Yeah, but that's like when I went to see Larry Hahn in Oregon, and he came up doing this kind of building, and we certainly weren't seeing to the extent that he did the kind of the tract housing, but in the area we were working on, this Habitat for Humanity house, it was the same, sort of that vibe of like, we're on this one and we're framing it, but the one next door has a foundation, and the one prior to that is still just doing site work, and it's just like they move down the line. It's interesting to watch it's like a flip book of houses coming together.
Well, and we also got to see, and I had an interesting conversation with Eric Woodhouse, who built the Best Energy Smart Home from last year that he won the award. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting to talk to him. He's essentially a spec builder. You maybe sometimes he's a house flipper, but mostly a spec builder because most of the time the renovations are happening to such a large degree that he's basically building a new house, if not scraping the house and starting with a lot. And what was interesting that he had to say, and I've just been working on an article about how to flip houses, and one of the things that our author found over and over and over again from people who are doing this successfully is, you don't do anything extra on a flip.
Yeah.
You just do what is right for that market, that neighborhood. But Eric says that he can actually do extra, and he can do what he wants to with these houses. And for him, that means building in energy efficiency. Yeah. That house that we published was zero energy because the market is so crazy in California that his profits are going to come down a little bit, but he's still going to make a boatload of money.
Yeah, he's going to feel good about the house.
And he's going to feel good about what he did. So in that wild California real estate market, he's able to, do this, just build spec houses and do flips and actually do them well and right and care about the craftsmanship and the quality of home and not just the profit.
Yeah. So how would you describe the quality of homes that you toured on the mega developments?
It was hard to say. I mean, I really look at what I was looking at, in terms of what I was seeing, being built, it's hard to say. I mean, I don't even understand that level of construction and that degree of it, enough to really know what I was seeing.
Were you able to go into any finished ones?
Yeah, we went into
finished ones.
Almost everywhere.
Okay.
And there were some things you could tell they knew exactly what buyers wanted. They knew. I'm sure they were very
countertops and stainless steel still.
Yeah, all stoneless, all
Stoneless.
stoneless, all
Nice.
stone countertops.
Yeah.
Lots of professional looking appliances. Surprisingly, not a whole lot of exceptional flooring. Lots of laminates and engineered woods. Lots of carpet.
How are we doing on the roof lines?
Lots of glass in the bathroom. Lots of
Really?
glass shower doors and things.
Oh, okay.
But not like true curbless showers, just like the pans that give you the little curb that you walk
Right.
into,
Yeah, I hate
and that kind of thing in the bathroom. What I was found really fascinating is that I didn't see any signs of anything high tech.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, in this area, I'm going to go in these places and they're going to be like high tech. And Rob and I talked about this a little bit afterwards, and we're speculating that maybe the high tech thing is not something that's going to actually be built into houses. It's more about everything's wireless and it's devices and little gadgets.
Yeah.
It's not something that's
You've
going to
got
actually be built in.
Your Nest thermostat and your smart speaker. So
Right.
what else do you need?
What else do you need? Yeah.
Your smart TV.
Yeah. Well, what about the exterior? Vinyl siding? What are we talking about?
Things like fiber cement and stucco
Yeah.
and vinyl.
The roof line's insane, or are they simplified?
Justin's very concerned about the roof lines.
Yeah,
Well,
not
listen,
too.
roofs
They're-
are terrible around here.
But when they're building tall like this,
Yeah.
the roofs become a little bit more out of sight and
Yeah.
a little less. Like if you
So you
what
couldn't see
Marion
them without your saying.
Cusato.
They're too far away for you to see.
Brian didn't tilt his head up.
But Marion Cusato, how she describes like the way McMansion roof lines got to be the way they are was to draw the eye up to the roof and take it away from the details on the house, and so that when there were trees in the front yard, you actually had some detail to see above the trees. So it was like this idea of getting
What?
people to look up. It was getting people to look up.
To what end?
And
Where am I going? Why am I looking up? What, you want to take my
because
eye
it's-
off the house?
Yes. And her whole thing, and she wrote about this in the magazine about roof lines, was about how good design actually brings the eye down, brings the viewer's eye down. But with McMansions, they were bringing the eyes up. They're bringing all the viewers' eyes up.
To make it appear grand,
Maybe to
or
make it appear grand,
larger,
exactly.
and
Yeah.
fancy.
But the roof
Nested
lines
gables, Rob.
They didn't jump
Nested
out at me
gables.
the same way in more sprawling neighborhoods with McMansions did.
The unofficial slogan of the Fine Home Building Podcast is gables on gables on gables.
yeah. Whoever has more nested gables wins.
Yeah.
They're happier and more successful.
Get your bumper stickers. Gables on gables on gables.
So it was really fascinating. It's fascinating to sort of see that world of construction a little
Yeah,
bit and to
it's a
see that
different-
real estate
it's a
market.
different
and-
world.
yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
You guys want to jump into questions, or do you want to?
That's up to you. I think you're the host.
It's really a democracy, though.
Really? Is it?
Yeah.
Is that how you run it?
I didn't know that. That changes everything.
Shut his mic.
Tom writes to us, my cedar siding is coming up for a coat of paint either this year or next. The window trim's in fairly poor shape due to rot and would also be replaced. The siding itself is in okay shape. It mostly needs a coat of paint. The house was built in the early 80s and is located in the Northeast. The interior square footage is 3,000. We live in a heavily wooded area, so there's a lot of moisture and a lot of insects. I'm wondering what the cost increase would be to replace the siding with fiber cement that has durable factory-applied paint. I'm thinking $5,000 to paint and $10,000 to replace. I'm very confused by the track of this question because it starts with saying we don't need to replace the siding. So is he essentially saying
I think he's wondering
how much more is it to just replace the siding that has paint on it?
Yes.
Well, I mean,
Just don't replace your siding if it's
okay.
Doesn't need replacement.
So we gotta back up though. I mean,
back it up.
if the siding really truly just needs a coat of paint, that certainly seems like it's going to be your cheapest option. Because if you don't have to do a lot of heavy prep work, like scraping, bad air in here. If you don't have to do a lot of prepping, like scraping and patching a lot of rot, I mean, he mentions the window trim, but
What's going on here, guys? Everyone okay? Everyone need 5 minutes? Catch your breath?
it's just the fumes from the scraping and the lead paint. What do you guys think?
Well, I think this is an odd question. So, like you pointed out, he says he says the siding's in pretty good shape. So I'm curious why he wants to replace the siding in the first place. And I'm gonna fathom a guess. Well, first of all, he's also asking us for quotes, bids, and the answer to your question is to get a couple quotes.
Well, yeah,
in your area, based on very specific stuff.
He said
shoot from the hip, Brian. How much is it going to cost him?
He said in the Northeast, and the numbers that he's pitching sound low.
Yeah, they
5,000 to paint, 10,000 to replace.
They seem very low.
Yeah, you're not. I think you'd be surprised that it's going to cost more than that. You can easily find out though by figuring out your exterior square footage, just length times width, and rough it out. You can skip windows and doors, and then go online. Use a lap siding calculator to figure out how many pieces of siding you'd need, and the pricing for something like fiber cement is easy to find online, and just do the math and see for materials what it would cost. And as just a really rough starting point, you just double the materials as maybe a real ballpark of what am I in for. I mean, it might not be what it comes out to be. It might be more than that, but it's a good back of the napkin gauge.
Yeah, and then figure out the environmental costs, and then we'll talk. Then we'll start again.
Right. There's no need to rip all that siding off and
throw it away.
Yeah. The thing is, if you don't need to do a lot of scraping and prep work, you can get in there, wash the siding really good, spray it, back brush after you spray. I mean, this is a job that, sure, you could hire it out, or you could do it yourself. I mean, it depends what you want to get into at this. Sprayers make it very, very approachable, I think.
You sprayed your house, right?
I sprayed my house, yep. And I mean, a lot of exterior painters are spraying now. That's all they do. Because it's just,
Is masking a pain? Like, does it take forever to mask?
Yes.
That's what I always think about. Like,
the painting.
People who do it regularly, they have the right tools. They have those things that the tape dispensers and stuff, and they get good at it, and they go pretty fast.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not.
Did you get a lot of overspray on your project?
No, not really. One thing that worked for me was I took the storm windows and I wrapped the storm windows in plastic and then put them back in so that they were just like you wrapped a frame and then slid it back in its opening. So now they're, without having to tape everything together and mask it off, they're just done. Then you can just do the window trim right there.
Yep.
And then when you want to come back and do the siding, you can just hold up a shield to do the siding right up to the window trim, and then you can just touch up with a brush or whatever. So, I mean, I guess the point is that it eventually got to the point where I learned what I had to mask and what I didn't have to mask. Gotcha. And you didn't have to mask everything.
Okay.
I didn't feel like I needed to.
All right, so this guy's painting his siding.
That's what I would think.
Paint your siding.
Paint your siding.
Paint your siding.
Okay.
Consensus. All right, Matt writes, I'd like to start out by saying I love the show and have listened to every episode, but haven't heard about this topic yet. I'm general contracting my own house and doing as much work as I can myself. Our plans call for a walkout patio, either pavers or stone, off of our kitchen. So how do you do a walkout patio above a basement? My door threshold is about 22 inches above the concrete foundation, and this is where we would like to have the stone patio. How do we maintain the 6-inch clearance from the ground to the wood framing and siding? As you can see in the photo, which you'll see at finehomebuilding.com/podcast, my plan started with peel and stick flashing over the OSB and lapping down over the concrete. Then I figured I could cover that with a layer of foam for protection and insulation, cover that foam with pressure-treated plywood for UV protection, and backfill with a well-draining material. What are your thoughts? Is this a bad idea? So this one is another one that I feel like it turned into two questions. Because he sort of asked the question, then he says what he's doing, and from the photo, it's already in progress. So for those of you who don't have the photo in front of you, what we're essentially talking about is the grade in the back of the house drops off. Severely. And there's the kitchen door is in the framed opening, but there's a couple of feet of concrete foundation sticking out above the ground. And so he's going to fill in there with a patio, which needs to come up close to the siding. So, thoughts? It looks like from the other parts of his photo, I can see there's a couple of windows that you can see peripherally, and they look like they have foam, like they're packed out with foam.
Right.
So it looks like he's going to put rigid foam on the outside of the house,
Yep.
which is cool. So good for you on that one, Matt. And it looks like like he said in the question, the transition from OSB sheathing to the foundation wall is skinned with Henry Blue Skin peel and stick membrane. So that's weather tight.
Yeah, but then he was talking about putting rigid foam over that.
Yeah.
Then another layer of
I get lost with the
pressure-treated
plywood.
plywood. I don't understand what the plywood is doing. I think to serve as a backer for his dimple mat or whatever he's going to put up against that. Can he do? He could just put that against the rigid foam, though. Couldn't
So
he?
we're not pouring concrete here, though, right?
think so.
It sounds like he just wants to cordon this off and pack it with fill to bring it up to grade.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see that as a problem. I mean, you've created drainage between the house and the concrete. I would be a little worried about the foam being that close to grade, and maybe it's, I don't know where Matt is. Maybe there's insects are a problem. Maybe they're not, because they'll make a little house in that foam down by grade if you don't protect it.
It also depends what foam he's using, right? Some is rated for.
Yeah, you can get some that have borate chemicals in it. Is that what you mean?
Well, no, like polyiso you can't use below grade.
Oh, I thought you meant for the insects. Yeah, you're not supposed to use polyiso where it can
high
get
density EPS or XPS, right?
Yeah. Do you think he's talking about under the patio? Is that why you're asking that?
No, he's talking about putting it, I think, running that below grade.
We need more information.
Of course we do.
I think
But no, he's talking about that running that below grade and then kind of putting another protective barrier over that rigid foam to prevent his fill or any damage, I think, when he starts to backfill this patio area.
So we're essentially talking about how do I separate my built-up patio from the house?
Yeah.
So that I don't rot my framing and my siding and all that stuff. All right, good. We figured out the question then. Now we'll turn to Brian for the answer.
Because Brian has experience with the patios.
Yeah, but I'm not sure about this. So he wants to maintain 6 inches from.
Well, that's what they usually call for.
Between the patio, the surface of the patio, and
anything wood.
Yeah. So
Okay,
if you
so first
maintain
course
what
is
if you
siding.
maintain what is called for, why do you have to do anything against your foundation? There's
I don't
dirt,
think he's
there's
gonna-
dirt against your foundation all the way down.
Because he can't maintain it.
So he wants to encroach on that. He wants to come up and but fill against the wood.
Look at the difference between the bottom edge of that wall sheathing and where his door is. And I think he said it's 22 inches. It's 22 inches above the concrete foundation. So he has to backfill up high enough that he's going to be backfilling against the sheathing.
Build a deck. That's a bad idea.
Yeah, it's not great. But
Right? It's a bad idea.
What you could do is maybe do some steps leading down to a patio, like just lower the patio so
that's
it's on
what
the
I-
concrete.
Well, absolutely. Then you don't have
Yeah.
to do anything. You just put a patio base in, and you can plan the elevation so that it's 2 risers down
Right.
and get there.
Right. I mean, we could certainly come up with creative solutions to allow you to do this, but it's not a great plan looking at the photo and seeing how high you have to. In my head, before I look back at the photo again, we were talking, I figured it was like we're going to be encroaching on it, not covering it.
Right.
You know, you could put up, I mean, you already put peel and stick. I guess you could cover it with some kind of sheet metal to really feel like there's no chance it was going to come in contact, but I don't know. You know, like soldered copper but this is why people don't put patios
Like,
up to wood, you know?
Yeah.
Although they do it with stone front steps a lot, and it's often a problem. I mean, that's kind of the thing. Not 22 inches, though. That's too high. It's too much siding.
All right, alter the design. Stop what you're doing.
I don't know how you're putting a patio there anyway. Look how much that drops off.
I know.
It
is crazy
You
steep.
know that I prefer patios to decks.
I'm
but
with you,
that
brother.
looks like a place for a deck.
Yeah.
Or a lot of grade, a lot of fill.
A lot of fill.
Yeah, but you can't. He's already built the house so that the wood framing steps down with the grade. So even a retaining wall.
Yeah, but even that
It's
form
gonna
work,
be
like what's
trouble.
I'm just looking at that top of that foundation wall there, by the pipe coming up through.
Yeah.
No, that's foam. That's foam
yeah,
you're looking at.
that's
Oh,
foam.
okay. That's
All
why
right,
it looks.
let's move on.
All right. Yeah. Sorry.
People can't
folks.
see the photo. If you can see the photo, though, try to find the pickaxe. Jeff and I were playing a little game of highlights for kids of who can spot where the pickaxe is laying in the dirt.
got it.
I got it.
It's pretty well masked, though.
Not
All right.
bad. Not bad.
I would have lost that thing. Blends right in. Pete writes, we're planning to take down a wall between our living room and dining room, which we think is load bearing. The current plan is to add a beam, but leave it exposed and dress it up with some nicer wood and maybe stain it to look like a solid beam. My plan is to just skin it with pine or something similar, but we've never done this and are looking for lessons learned or other advice from you guys. Thanks. So I guess we should start with load bearing walls, right? How to tell if it's load bearing?
So is that okay?
we ask Jeff?
We're having a tough time with the questions because I was wondering: is he asking like, he's clearly going to do this. Is he looking for advice on how to ensure that he supports load bearing?
I read it. The question is mostly, how do I skin this thing and make it look like a beam?
All right, but you want to start at the beginning.
Well, which we think is load bearing, indicates to me that there's some uncertainty.
We might want to address it.
Yeah.
All right.
Because maybe you don't have to put a beam. Jeff, why don't you tell us how we tell if it's load bearing? You've been here for 127 podcasts. You should know by now. Well, you can. I guess if it's only a single floor house and you can get up to the attic, you can look at the direction of the joists, and if the joists cross over the top of the wall that you want to take out, and it's likely that that wall is bearing, especially if joists cross over and lap each other, like from two different directions, and they're both cut and they rest on top of that. Then you certainly have to support it. If the joists are going parallel to the place you want to put the beam, you're probably fine without it. That's one way to know. I guess if you don't have access upstairs, you're going to have to cut an exploratory hole somewhere in the ceiling and check it out, or get a really good stud finder and see if you can figure it out. Actually, I might just try poking holes. Pick one spot where you can maybe hide it, maybe near the corner of the room or something, and make a series of really small diameter drilled holes. You're moving 16 or 20 inches in one direction, and you're going to hit at least one piece of framing.
Are you trying to...
And then try and hit the other one to determine which direction they're running in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say typically the style of the house could... I was about to say typically the style of the house could kind of let you determine the orientation.
Sure, range, for sure.
But my brother has a very basic colonial, not that old, and the floor joists are running in the completely opposite direction that you think they would. For whatever reason, they flip them,
I've seen that too. And sometimes they change directions.
Yeah.
You especially see that a lot in basements where, depending on the openings and the bump outs they're trying to work with.
Yep. So I guess it's safe to never assume.
Don't assume.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So now we're popping the beam in there. Sounds like they want the beam to be below the joists rather than flush up into it, which you can also do. So below it, and then we're assuming they know about putting in support posts on either end of the beam, and then supporting the at the bottom of the post down to whatever the carrying thing is in the floor below, the squash blocks. You can find that information on any number of articles that we have on installing a beam to replace a wall. So boxing it out, though. So
boxing it out specifically to look like a solid beam.
Yeah, because a lot of times it's boxed out like you do one board that skins the whole bottom, and then the two side boards come down and they overlap the bottom just a little bit so that there's a little reveal there. That allows you to hide any slight discrepancies in the beam or the boards, creates a little shadow line for interest. And we've said this before on the show, but usually in trim carpentry, you aim for somewhere to hide like that because things move, things are not perfectly straight. Shadow lines add visual interest, but they also make everything look better from a craftsmanship point of view. But if you're trying to make it look like a beam,
and you're going to do some stained natural wood, you can build that on a bench, right? And you can do mitered corners.
I think you'd have to do mitered corners or beveled. We're back to this thing again.
Or beveled.
So nobody knows. Nobody knows.
You would miter your joints, and then you can slide that up to cover that. That'd be the way to do it to make it look solid. If you really wanted it to look solid, and then it's still not going to quite look right, but it's going to be the best.
Grain is going to look a little bit funky.
Yeah, but it's going to be the best option for making it look solid. And then you can slide that up and install it as a unit like that.
I guess
I wouldn't try to do it. I wouldn't try to build it. Put it together in place for the reasons Justin brought up, that things are going to be a little wonky. But once you have it built, you can actually make it. I ran into trouble with this once before, but you can actually make it just a little bit longer than the depth of the beam, so that the bottom's floating below it a little bit, and you're just going to nail it to the sides.
You want it to be oversized.
You want it to be oversized and gives you some wiggle room.
But you're right. It shouldn't be. Worst case, you need two people to lift it. It shouldn't be heavy. You will have to scribe two ends and lift it up, and that can get a little tricky to get it fit in there. But I would definitely go with Brian's suggestion of doing a long mitered joint at the bottom edge, glued and nailed, and really set up for 24 hours before you go to touch it, because you want that thing to act like a solid piece before you get in and start moving it, because you start to bang it around to fit into a tight spot, and it's going to start to open up and fracture. And the grain thing.
Yeah, how do you resolve that?
Yeah. Well, so the issue we're talking about is that, you know, if you buy 3 flat sawn boards and then you put them around a beam, that's not what a natural cut wood beam is going to look like. The grain is going to be different on one of those 3 sides. Mm-hmm. And it would look different mostly on the bottom from what you'd buy. So I guess you could change the cut of the board for the bottom. Get something like
what would you be looking for though?
You're never going to get it to match up with the side.
A quarter sawn?
Yeah, it would be probably rift sawn. But you're never going to get it to match up. One way that you could avoid this and just get like a nice uniform look would be if you just bought 3 rift sawn boards, because then that grain is all going to run the same direction on every piece.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
And so it might come together a little easily, especially with something like pine, where you're not going to see the grain lines. Like if you got Douglas fir, for instance, you're going to see significant lines, but pine is just going to look blonde.
And it kind of depends. Like,
I don't know where you're going to get quarter sawn pine though, or rift sawn pine.
Yeah, and it depends a little bit what, like stylistically, what he, you know, if he's thinking rustic and knotty pine's good, get real knotty pine, just do it, and like no big deal. You got knots on all sides anyway, no big deal. If he was looking for a more modern look, then I'd get that, like you were saying, something tight grained and have long grain running in all directions. And you know, there's not many in this. Maybe, I don't know, you guys may disagree with me on this, but there's not many people who are going to look at that beam and go,
yes,
that grain's not right.
No, nobody's not gonna
when you get a little squirrely is when you get to the end. If you're showing the end grain of something and you wrap that with what should be face grain, that's when it starts to look weird to people, or at least to me.
Right.
I can sort of forgive up till that point. But I think actually knotty pine, or any pine in general, is I don't know if this is on purpose, but it seems like a good choice because it's a pretty subtle grain. And like you said, knots would be on every side anyway.
Yeah.
And you know, Brian will suggest that you use pre-stain conditioner on that thing. Would you pre-finish it before it goes up?
Yeah, why not?
I think I would too. Yeah. What about where it hits the ceiling and the walls? That's, you know, you're going to be tempted to add a second layer of like little trim or something to help hide that. But how to make that look good?
Well,
because you got to have enough.
Tear away, bead.
You got to have enough room
to drywall in.
You got to have enough room to get it up into place, so it can't be like a perfect fit.
Right. You could.
Well, that reminds me, Rob. We got to talk about your vanity after this, because that's the similar sort of situation, fitting it between 2 walls.
Right. And you could put a little bit of a back bevel on the top, so that if you did have to do some scribing, it was easy to do.
Yes.
And you could, if you put a little, if you had to kind of wrap some trim around where it meets the walls, if it was really for some reason, if it was hard to make it get it tight, and even if that's because of someone's skill, maybe he's, maybe Pete's a do-it-yourselfer, even if it's a skill thing, you could do like a really subtle, like small piece of trim painted the wall color, and probably mostly will disappear.
Yeah. What you don't want is to try and caulk it, because that's going to draw your eye to it more than anything else. I mean, like Brian said, if you don't know what back beveling is, you cut it just like you would cut the pieces where they're going to come together at a 45-degree angle, or a little steeper than 45, so that you know it's going to be tight. You can do the same thing along the top edge, so that from the outside of the beam it looks like a solid piece of wood, but it actually has a hidden bevel, which leaves the very tip of it thin. So if you need to scribe it, you just have to remove a little bit of material rather than the full 3/4 or whatever thickness to get it to fit. So you're only touching the ceiling in one little narrow point, so it's easier to finesse it to get it to fit right. You don't have to worry about the depth of it too.
You know, I've only done that with face frames. I've never done that with something like this.
Yeah.
But what I learned is that you actually have to then scribe very carefully. The material comes off fast.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Like one pass with your black
plate.
Yeah. I've done skinning beams like this, but I've always done it with built up stuff. I mean, there's always easy, because you can you worry about the visible part of the bottom and the 2 sides, and you don't even have to extend all the way up to the ceiling, because then a second piece goes on, and then a crown molding or something to dress it up. It's usually the style I'm used to working in. So when you get to like that rustic wood beam look, I mean, of course, the other option here is just get a wood beam and just do this in one piece with a structural wood beam.
Oh, I got you. Like an actual.
I mean,
go to a. Yeah.
If you start to add up the effort that goes into it,
Sure.
and the amount of money you're going to spend on the pine to skin it,
I guess that would depend upon.
Would you need an engineer to get a stamp on that though for your if you were getting a permit for this?
I would, yes, or you would just hugely oversize it.
And then the building inspector would say okay because it's giant.
And I don't know. It's building inspectors are building inspectors. I mean,
True,
yours might say
I think
yes.
that's the only.
Yours might say yes. Yours might
It's
say
the most
no.
accurate thing we've said the last 45 minutes.
Yeah. Building inspectors are building inspectors. For
I saw
sure.
a great. It's actually on our website right now, and I like this kind of thing. But I saw a remodel where they opened up some space and they just stuck a big steel I-beam in and left it exposed. And it's like a rustic house, and they just did it.
Hey now.
Hey.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I was going to say
Brian's Italian hand motions are getting out of control.
The best version of these are I've seen like steel moment frames wrapped in timbers, like on some Hutker projects, and like they're heavily distressed, and they look like reclaimed barn beams, but they're like hand hewn. And then the other thing is a couple modern houses, which is Justin's gonna like just say not to do this.
Was it some kind of concrete pre-stressed beam or something?
No,
stupid?
where we've seen people kind of leave. They've spec'd like PSL or parastrand lumber
I like that.
for the beam and
don't
left
mind
that
that.
exposed.
I don't mind that.
Which I guess could work in
actually
more
like-
modern spaces.
I
can throw
actually
some
like we
photos
talked
of that
about. I
up.
talked about that in the last episode. We had the guys from LP on here, and we were talking about engineered lumber, and people are using that stuff for countertops. And we saw some at the San Francisco trade show. They had like displays of like benches made out of it. I think it's cool. I've been in a
the
bar that
parastrand
had
stuff?
one.
Last year's Editor's
Parastrand
Choice
LDL.
Award.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Remember that ceiling or the floor system in the Editor's Choice Award last year? It looked like timber framed work, but it was just those exposed.
Oh, really?
The paralams, I think.
Yeah, they look
Yeah.
sweet.
Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can get one of those. I actually
Some
don't-
people hate it. We always get some hate mail about that. We got some about that house.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, some people are like, mad about it.
Well, it's
Why?
a definite. It's a certain look. That's
It's a
for
look.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about using OSB as an interior finish before, haven't we? Brian tried to use it and couldn't sand the markings off of
Oh
it.
yeah, you wanted to use that as like
I
exposed flooring,
couldn't
right?
sand. Yeah, because I saw it in a house actually, and I loved it. And I could not sand the paint off of it.
Really?
Yeah, and
Like-
I rented a floor sander, like the orbital floor sanders, and I could not get it off.
Really?
Yeah.
Like you couldn't sand it essentially. Like you couldn't
Yes.
sand the floor panels.
I couldn't
it's not that you
sand
couldn't
them.
remove it.
Yes.
you couldn't
I
remove
could
anything.
not remove anything.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was it just
I didn't
gumming
try
up?
like a drum sander or something. It did gum up a little bit, and yeah, it just didn't. It just didn't work.
Was it commodity OSB or was
I
it
think
like
it's 90%
was
adhesive anyway.
commodity OSB?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Very
I know
little-
it's
very little
been
wood in
done,
there.
It's a
'cause
resin
I saw
sheet.
it done. Maybe they used like again those drum sanders are a lot more aggressive.
I wonder what that would look like.
Awesome. Looks pretty good.
some manufacturer needs to come out with a version that's only labeled on one side?
It wouldn't have looked good if I did. It looked good because the guy was dynamite designer.
Where did you do this? What did you end up doing with the space?
I just covered it. I just used it as so. I needed to use it. I needed to level flooring anyway.
Oh, you thought-
so? That's why I put it down. I just gave it a try.
I can picture you going, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna use this.
Anyway, so we were talking about in the course of that question fitting the beam between two walls and how difficult that can be from a scribing point of view, and it reminded me that you just did that or are about to do it, Rob.
I'm about to do it. I'm
And
about
for
to
a
install
vanity.
the vanity in my bathroom upstairs.
Yeah.
Which is captured between two walls. So I've got the box set. I'm going to add the face frame after. It's being painted right now.
Yeah. I got one of those jobs coming up sometime soon too.
And I remember talking about it earlier when I think I had asked you what's the best way to do it.
Sometimes you really can get away with just
Yeah.
beveling both ends and kind of right in there.
Like I said, before I started like priming and painting the face frame, I just kind of put it into place and try to see if this thing was gonna get to where it needs to go. And I think I'll be able to get it.
I've actually been in situations. I mean, if you can get it tight, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of caulk. I mean, because if it's nothing but super tight wood and you paint it, it's going to crack and it's going to show that gap. And
Yeah.
some people have this thing like zero caulk is a point of pride. And it's like, well, caulk is really meant to expand and contract in a small gap or a large one
Right.
to make it look good. So use
Well, now,
caulk.
what about? Are you doing inset doors?
Yeah.
So, any concern when you're kind of knocking that thing in there of if the walls aren't square of knocking it out of square. And I mean, no.
Not the way Rob builds it. Come on.
No, I use pocket screws. Strongest joint out there. Not kidding. Not kidding.
Did you actually check though? I mean, you might get into trouble with something like I doubt you have this on a vanity, but sometimes if you have like pull-out drawers, if the doors can't open far enough because they're hitting a wall, then you won't be able to pull the drawer out, that kind of stuff. So nothing like that you have to worry about.
No.
You just got 2 doors down below?
Yeah. Yep.
Those knobs gonna hit the wall? You hoser?
Maybe. I'm gonna use those flush set, ring knobs.
So wait, what are you gonna do? We didn't actually.
Oh, so I think I'm gonna be able to. Sorry,
we skipped that part.
So I did back bevel the each side of the face frame to kind of ease.
What angle did you put on that sucker?
I don't know.
How'd you back?
Angle-ish.
Did you?
I just took I didn't cut them. I just took a block plane.
Oh, okay.
Took that back edge off a bit.
I'm impressed you have a block plane.
Yeah. It's sharpish.
It was once sharp.
It was once sharp. So I think I'll be able to get it in. If not, you had mentioned this, to put a kind of a spreader board between the 2 walls where you could actually get a little bit of room by just forcing the studs and the drywall back just a hair. Yeah. You don't need much.
No, I mean, hopefully you're close enough that...
Yeah.
Well, will you explain how you do that?
So you can do it with... you ever seen like those third hands? Fast Cap makes third hands. It's like a little jack kind of a thing. It's you use it to hold up like a dust divider or something. You could use that. You put it on I would say put a board vertically on one wall, or actually horizontally, and then the same thing on the other wall, and you're just creating just a little bit of force between the 2 walls to just. Hopefully, what you're doing is you're bowing them a bit,
just until those screws pop and the corners crack.
I mean, it's it's delicate. If you are landing between studs, you might be better off. I don't know.
Sure.
Maybe.
Well, yeah, because you're only looking for...
Yeah, I think this is like the
a
thing.
16th?
Like, yeah, you're not
even
just a hair. I mean, I don't think you're putting like a board in there and then taking your framing hammer and like beating that board down to force those walls apart.
What I like to do if I'm building this thing on site is I will take the 2 rails before I assemble the face frame, scribe one rail to the wall, scribe the other rail to the wall, and then figure out the distance between them so that I know that I'm getting an exact scribe fit on both sides and the exact length I need. Then take it out, assemble it, and then I know I don't have to force it in and scribe it. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm just forcing it in to fit and it's done. Getting it into place to then scribe it is going to be trickier. One way you can do that though is if you have like let's just call it a 36-inch vanity. So you got the 36-inch length. You pop one side into the corner, and you can sort of get in there to scribe that. Then you have to back it out, pop the other side in the corner, scribe that, and it gets a little trickier to figure out if I take off this scribe mark and that scribe mark, am I left with the right amount in the middle, or did I just cut myself too short? That's why I like to kind of do it in place. I've seen other cabinet guys too, like where an end panel hits a wall, they will put a little. And I never got to talk to the guy, I just saw it. So I'm interpreting what was going on, but maybe I'm wrong. It looked like they left a little rabbet in the outside edge, the outside right where it meets the wall, and then they filled that rabbet with caulk.
Oh,
so they just left a little place, a little channel to put a bead down. That's what I interpreted. That's what I saw.
But you don't want 3 points of contact on your beaded caulk.
Why wouldn't you just caulk whatever little tiny gap you had then, instead of doing that?
So you could point to it and say, hey, look what I thought about. It's my caulk
I don't
channel.
know.
There's no benefit in the face frame touching the wall.
I guess to give the caulk a place to bind. At least maybe that's what they thought.
Weird.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know either.
If
It doesn't
this
make
is
sense.
paint grade and you're going to caulk it anyway,
It is, Brian.
you're just going to caulk the thing.
I am
Yeah,
gonna
but
caulk
you
Get
don't
it.
it in there and caulk it.
But you don't want to be trying to use caulk as a filler. You want to use it as like a last little touch up, not as like a I'm a quarter inch away from the wall.
Super wavy.
Let's say the whole thing was a 16th short, and then you had a 32nd on each side to caulk. I'm happy with that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
30 seconds.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because again, things are going to move. They're going to expand and contract, and if you don't want it to pop,
I'll let you know how it goes.
I want photo evidence.
Brian was going to give me a dead blow hammer to get it in there.
If you put it in right now, the way the weather is, the thing's going to shrink up soon anyway, and it's going to pull away from the walls because it's been so humid.
Yeah, you're screwed, Rob. I would wait.
So
No, I'm not gonna wait.
I'd wait till winter.
No, I'm gonna dip it
Wait
in
till the
water
dry
and then put it in
season.
there.
Try to super dry the room or super dry the
whenever-
face frame before you put it
Yeah,
in.
I will.
How did you scribe both sides? Did you already do that part?
Did not describe them.
I mean, if you're lucky, you don't need to, right? I mean,
Correct.
In my head, I'm working.
It's like this. These are brand new. I mean, they should be straight.
Did you check them?
Yeah.
All right.
I'll take pictures. I'll do a little video thing. I'm not gonna do any of that, by the way. Post it on social media. Say, look at the gap. Is it tight enough for everybody? No? Okay.
All right. All right. We'll see you guys all next week for another fantastic edition of the Fine Home Building Podcast. You can find out more about the podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Watch a video version. Send us a question. You can also email us a question to FHBpodcast@taunton.com. Tell your friends. Tell your neighbors. Tell everybody else. This is Justin for Rob and Brian and Jeff. Saying keep craft alive and happy building.